all else unity. He values unity above the pursuit of truth. For instance, if I believe that 1 plus 1 equals 2, and my neighbor believes that 1 plus 1 equals 3, that does not bother me if my neighbor believes that 1 plus 1, that numbers have value, and that that all numbers have inherent value, and that by using mathematical procedure, you can add those numbers, you can do a computation and come up with an answer. If my neighbor believes that there is an answer to that question of what 1 plus 1 equals, and that there are rules for finding it out, then I'm happy to have a discussion with my neighbor, because then I might be able to convince my neighbor that he's wrong. I might be able to go to my neighbor and say, your understanding of the value of the integer of 1 is wrong. And I want to show you how 1 plus 1 really equals 2. But if my neighbor says, I don't know what 1 plus 1 equals, I don't know if anybody knows what 1 plus 1 equals, but all that matters is that we get along, then I don't want to have a discussion with that person, because I'm interested in knowing the truth. And there's a sense in which what's going on there is Obama is saying, and it's not just Obama, it's the world today, everybody's saying, I don't really care what is right or wrong on these issues that we're at variance at. I just want us all to get along. Therefore, I'm going to ask this person who I disagree with on principal things to give the invocation at my inauguration, because I want to show you that I value unity above truth. But when we value unity above truth, we cease to ask the question why. And that's a subversion of knowledge, it's a subversion of inquiry, and it's really an exaltation of agnosticism. It's just us throwing our hands in the air and saying, I have no idea what is true, or how to arrive at what is true. I'm only interested in all of us not fighting. Okay, all of us getting along. And I just don't want to see that. And that's my objection here. You need to understand that asking why is important. Looking to find the truth is important. Habakkuk did a difficult thing, and it did injury to his own sensibility, but it was a valuable thing in his life, and it changed his life greatly. The second thing I want you to see here is that those who ask why are debtors. Those who ask why are debtors. Look at me at verses 17 and 18. Here, Habakkuk continues, though the fig tree should not blossom, and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls, yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. Our law books are filled with Good Samaritan laws. Have you ever heard those laws? Good Samaritan laws are based on the old Latin maxim, which is that silence gives consent. That if the thinking goes, if you're walking down the street and you see an old woman being beaten up badly and hit and beaten, and they're robbing her, and you see it and you see what's going on and you walk on by, our government can prosecute you for a crime because your silence, by not saying anything, shows that you give consent to the action. It's not saying you have to go above and beyond the call of duty, but you need to do something to try to stop it. Yell out, call the police, go and try to fend off these attackers. You have to do something. Because if you're just silent and you walk on by, it shows that you have consent to what's being done. But not all silence is consent. Okay? Not everybody who walks down the street. Only the person who actually sees it going on is the one who's going to be charged with it. Therefore, some people try to walk through life with blinders on, right? They walk down the street and they stare at the ground and they don't want to see anything or anybody to the left or to the right, because they realize that to engage in anything, to see need, to see want, to see struggle, to see trial, means that they are going to have to be invested in it if they see it. And so people like to just be blind as they can be to everything going on around them. But what you understand, and what I understand as Christians, is that to ask why, to gain knowledge, is to make us in debt to that knowledge. When God opens up his mind to you and shows you something, that makes us indebted to do it, right? Once you know it to be true, once you understand it, you are bound to apply it to your life. Therefore, I just want to say this as a pastor to you. Take great care in quizzing God. Okay? take great care in your quizzing of God, because there are a lot of sleeping dogs out there in your life that if they were to be woken up, would eat you alive. That might eat you up, and at worst might snap that leash taut and run you all over hill and dale, or make you rub it behind the ears and not scratch it on the belly. There are a lot of sleeping dogs out there that if you wake them up by asking God these questions, it's going to ruin your life. So be careful when you ask God why, because he might tell you, and upon telling you, it might change your life. All you really need to do is ask the rich young ruler, for instance. The rich young ruler made a mistake by asking why. He came to Jesus, by all accounts, with a clear head and a clear conscience. And when he asked God, what do I need to be, when he asked Jesus, what do I need to do to be saved, Jesus replied, well, you need to keep all the commandments. Now, at that point, the rich young ruler should have stopped. He should have said, well, great, I've done that, and walk away. And he could have skipped to the loo, his darling, and been fine. But he asked one more question. He knew something wasn't quite right, so he asked why. Why this nagging sense that's not enough? And then Jesus lowered the boom on him, didn't he? And he got to the very heart of his insecurity, which was his wealth. And he said, what I want you to do is I want you to give everything you own to the poor. And at that, the rich young ruler walked away sad. Why did he walk away sad? Because he came there a rich man, but he left in debt. But because of that revelation by Jesus, he left that place in greater debt than all of his wealth. Because now he knew, because he knew that's what was required for salvation, he now knew he had to apply it. And by asking that question, it ruined him. So be careful. Now, I feel badly for the rich young ruler. He should have been thankful for that question and done what Jesus said. We only have to look at Zacchaeus to see what that's like. To see somebody coming into the question of why with great debt and leaving with great wealth. As he acts on what Jesus says and acts on what the Bible says. And that's really what I love about Habakkuk here. Look at this language. That Habakkuk says, listen, should the fig tree not blossom ever again? Should there be no more fruit on the vines? If the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, and the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no more cattle in the stalls. Even if all of that happens, Lord, I will exult in you. I will rejoice in you, the God of my salvation. He's able to do this because he's basically saying, okay, fine. If Chaldea is going to come, if there's no way that I can avoid it, if there's no way we can outrun these people or defend ourselves against them, if you're going to destroy them, I'm resigned to that fact. And I know it's going to mean famine. I know it's going to mean starvation. I know it's going to mean incredible hardship. But I'm stealing my heart away right now for the idea of that. And I'll rejoice.